The second season of Youjo Senki finally premiered on July 2026, nearly 10 years after the movie. I never lost faith, even when all we had was a single teaser trailer with nothing but Zetter's voice. The new season returns with much of his core staff, only the director is different from the one who handled Season 1 and the movie. I already notice a tonal shift. Season 1 kept the comedy mostly to post-credit scenes. Season 2 lets Tanya be goofy in the main runtime, probably to lighten the mood before things get dark. Well, we know the movie covers Volume 4, up to roughly Chapter 4, Reorganization, and the first episode of the second season covers the very first chapter of Volume 5. However, there is content and a lot of information that got lost in adaptation. Today we're going through everything Episode 1 left out, from Tanya's first Kampfgruppe to the political crisis brewing inside the Empire. And if you enjoy this type of content, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Let's begin. Let's start remembering what happened in Season 1 and the movie. Don't worry, it will be brief and will help us understand the events that were cut in the first episode of Season 2. At the very beginning of the conflict, we know that the Empire is surrounded by hostile nations, having frequent incidents at their border with the Entente and attempts to find weak points in their famous National Defense Plan 315 by the Francois Republic. This will be important later, because the Empire is a relatively new country that was minding its own business. But everything changed when the Entente attacked. I'm sorry I couldn't resist. Okay, the Entente crossed the border from several points, claiming the territory of Norden as a kind of domestic propaganda, but it ended bad for them. Having defeated them, the Empire made its first mistake. They became overconfident and decided to launch a major offensive against the Entente. This with the idea to free the Empire from the ever-present problem of being encircled. That is when the Republic opened a second front. The Empire was in trouble but kept them at bay, until Daisha II entered the war and, they were quickly defeated. In all of this the Commonwealth was neutral on paper, but really, they were gathering intelligence on the Empire and supporting their enemies with supplies. So, we have four nations united against the Empire for no reason. I repeat, they started nothing. They weren't even talking bad of other nations. Well, after defeating Daisha and the Entente and looking like they were being defeated by the Republic, the Commonwealth wanted to mediate the end of the war, believing the Empire was done, for they drafted a document giving really bad conditions to the Empire. Of course, the Empire didn't respond, which offended the Commonwealth politicians, and they decided to demonstrate their strength by deploying a unit of sea mages, at the exact moment when the Republic was defeated. Believing the war will end, the Empire was celebrating the start of peace talks, but that was a diversion, for Delugo ran away and founded the Free Republic. The Empire had no other option than to send an expeditionary corps to the southern continent remaining in the war. This is important to later understand the rage and resentment the people of the Empire feel against the other nation. But let's continue with the not-so-brief recap, and I promise this is the last recap you'll need or I will make in these videos. Then the Russi Federation unexpectedly attacked the Empire. We as readers know it was because of the interference of higher beings, making the Federation's leaders paranoid of being attacked by the Empire even when there was zero indication of it. This led to the attack on their capital Moskva and the Battle of Tingelhof, where Tanya and her battalion stopped the Russi Federation's advance. We end the movie with Tanya requesting a rearguard post, this with the idea to research and develop new tactics, and she is reassigned to the west, and in the post-credit scene, Tanya is informed of the formation of her new combat group. By this point we start Season 2, but the events that led to Tanya writing the idea of the Kampfgruppe was left out. Well, I can't say these events were completely cut because we see a version of them in the movie, and so I was 100% sure they were going to be omitted from Season 2, but the context of this events matters, and they happened chronologically after the fight against the Federation in the novel. After Tanya once again tries to obtain a safer rear-line assignment and fails, she is instead given a compromise by the General Staff. Research duties involving combat doctrine. A promise that her future assignment will depend on the results of this research. And temporary service on the Western Front against the Commonwealth, where the battle is less intense. Although the Empire and the Commonwealth had been in conflict for months, there had been no significant military movement from either side, until mid-April 1926. The Imperial Air Force has been clashing with the Royal Albion Air Force over the Dodebur Channel. Since then, the Imperial Army has been tasked with intercepting enemy forces to defend the Western Industrial Region. Tanya and her 203rd Mage Battalion repeatedly intercepts enemy mages, fighting for air supremacy in the border region. It's here where Tanya encounters the Imperial 103rd Fighter Wing code-named Mosquito, and remembers them from the Rhine campaign. A later key event is a combat search and rescue mission to recover downed high-ranking officers of the 114th Air Division. Tanya successfully coordinates with the 103rd Fighter Wing to rescue the officers, demonstrating her tactical flexibility and the Empire's effective inter-unit cooperation. She also makes her battalion have a good meal celebrating with the 103rd Fighter Wing. This is something she does a lot in the novels, that is why her battalion has such good relationships with other units. It's in this mission that Tanya engages with the Unified States Volunteer Mage Unit for the first time, and more importantly Mary Sue. Tanya downed much of this freshly out of training mages, including their commander, and that is why Colonel Drake is the one leading them afterwards. Tanya's confrontation with Mary Sue goes really close to their movie counterpart, except Mary doesn't go mini supernova, but Tanya admits the enemy mage is tough and thinks it's a shame she didn't end her life and that she reminded her of someone, but she later completely forgets about Mary. To Tanya she was an enemy of many, but to Mary, this fight showed her the devil that took her father's life, starting her slow descent into revenge monster. We see the Empire's precarious strategic position. They are fighting on multiple fronts. On paper, the Eastern Front is succeeding, the Southern Front is holding, and the Western Front is winning air battles. However, the Empire's resources are exhausted, their economy is strained and troops are stretched everywhere. Naval inferiority is a critical concern. The Commonwealth's navy dwarfs the Imperial fleet, making any invasion of the Commonwealth impossible. The Unified States' neutrality is revealed as a sham. They are providing material support to the Commonwealth and even deploying voluntary forces, operating independently. Tanya correctly identifies that provoking the US would be a fatal mistake. The Empire's only hope is to defeat the Federation quickly before the Unified States enters the war. After that rescue mission, Tanya comments about an experimental unit in her thesis, Unit Use and Operational Maneuvers in Modern Warfare. This will lead to the second cut of the anime. We arrive to the movie post-credits scene. Tanya is ordered to form and command the first ever combat group, named Salamander, directly under the General Staff, with the 203rd at its core. She is also promoted to Magic Lieutenant Colonel. She faces the daunting task of forming this unit in an absurdly short time frame, 5 days to form, 5 days to travel, and into combat within 3 weeks. She is given second-rate, inexperienced units, a new infantry battalion, outdated artillery, and old-model tanks. But Tanya uses bureaucratic maneuvering, personal connections and intimidation to secure better equipment and personnel. She trades with Rommel, giving him fuel in exchange for his allotment of newer tanks, contacts the Imperial 103rd Fighter Wing to join her Kampfgruppe, and leverages her influence to swap the useless infantry battalion for a better one from the Guard Division. Even after receiving an augmented battalion, Tanya asks for another mage company, but the Empire is suffering a severe mage shortage. Yet Tanya argues that her battalion was trained around a 4-company structure. More mages would dramatically improve combat effectiveness. This in the novel was funny because thought all of this, Tanya is really stressed, and even if she thinks she is behaving calmly, her battalion is scared out of their minds. While I too expected they will cut it, I wanted at least see a part of it. It would have shown Tanya's good connections. Lurjin, who had caught wind of the Kampfgruppe's formation via an incident that affected his own department, goes to Zetur to protest against Tanya being the commander of the new battle group and despairs the methods she is using to form it, fearing she is overstepping her authority. But Zetur tells him that she already had some sort of justification prepared. In order to verify the practicality of the combat groups in combat and mitigate the difficulties on the front lines, they had to employ the unit in a test, and the only way to do it is to put the one who came up with the idea in charge. We see a little of this in the episode. Then Zetur continues to explain the precarious position the Empire is in. They have their hands full with so many enemies, and the Unified States are sending supplies to the southern continent with the idea of provoking an Imperial attack on Unified States ships, giving their president the perfect excuse to enter the war. This is because their general public doesn't care nor want to enter the war. Worse, a major internal conflict within the General Staff is revealed, the Western faction, advocating for attritional warfare, versus the Eastern faction, advocating for a decisive, high-risk encirclement to end the war quickly. The Eastern faction gains the upper hand after the Battle of Traunsenberg, the one we see at the climax of the movie where Imperial forces encircled and destroyed a 400,000-strong Federation army with only 150,000 troops. This success leads to the approval of Operation Lakeside, or Order No. 41, a massive offensive to crush the remaining Federation forces. Zetur, despite his misgivings, decides to deploy Tanya and the Salamander Kampfgruppe to the Eastern Front to secure a quick victory before the situation collapses. He views Tanya as a bitter but necessary pill to swallow. Then we switch to the Federation's viewpoint, showing the fear and paranoia within their inner circle. No one dares offer an opinion for fear of being purged. Loria proposes a defense-in-depth strategy: use the vastness of their territory to draw the Imperial army deep in, overextend their supply lines, and then trap them in a brutal urban attrition battle at a politically significant city called Josephgrad. The Federation aims to bleed the Empire dry, using their numerical superiority and the Empire's need for a quick victory against them. At this moment we cover all the cut events of the Volume 4 and we start Volume 5. During the train ride toward the front, Tanya observes signs that worry her. Although logistics are still functioning well enough to provide decent food and coffee, she notices that railroads are operating at their limits. The Eastern Front has expanded enormously. Drawing upon memories from her previous life, Tanya compares the situation to Germany during World War II. She realizes that the Empire risks repeating history. Instead of suffering catastrophic defeats immediately, the Empire could slowly bleed itself dry through attrition. While traveling, she also reads patriotic letters supposedly written by schoolchildren and realizes the letters were obviously mass-produced because many shares identical wording. Rather than boosting morale, Tanya believes this kind of crude propaganda undermines credibility. She concludes that the Federation and Commonwealth wage information warfare much more skillfully than the Empire. I think the comical scene at the end of the first episode wanted to allude to this. This is relevant because propaganda and public opinion will become the greatest enemy to peace efforts, but we will see that in later chapters, so let's continue. Colonel UGER visits Tanya during the journey and explains the intense debate occurring inside Imperial High Command, with General von Zetur believing that continuing the advance is too dangerous and General von Ruddersdorf preferring one final massive offensive. Tanya notes that neither side is irrational. Both positions are strategically valid and the disagreement centers on risk. Unable to decide between the two strategies, High Command devises an experiment. Tanya's Kampfgruppe is ordered to defend a deliberately exposed salient. The mission's purpose is not simply defense. Instead, Headquarters wants Tanya to determine how strong the Federation has become, whether the enemy is capable of launching major counterattacks and whether the Empire can safely continue advancing. Tanya immediately realizes the truth. Her unit has essentially become laboratory rats. If they survive, Headquarters gains valuable data. If they die, the generals also gain valuable data. She gets rightfully mad. UGER can only tell her he will help however he can, maintaining the supply lines for her. UGER also reveals that pressure from civilians is increasing. The Empire's population wants the war finished quickly. Industry is exhausted and the civilians resent the food shortages caused by the Commonwealth blockade. So, military decisions are no longer based solely on battlefield realities. Political pressure now plays a major role. With all this explanation, we know why Tanya returned to the Eastern Front at the beginning of Episode 1 of Season 2. This part is also tricky, because we are back on the Russie Federation, yes, but in the anime is with Tanya's second Kampfgruppe, not the first, and the battle we see in the episode do happen, but later in the novel, so, let's just say that upon arrival, Tanya establishes defensive positions inside the exposed salient, encountering major problems mirroring the Empire's, like, the territory she is defending is far too large and she lacks enough infantry to defend everything, so, she adopts a mobile defense strategy instead of static defense. The Kampfgruppe will constantly maneuver rather than remain fixed, but the Federation avoids large-scale battles, preferring launching constant harassment attacks with guerrillas, commandos, and irregular militias, with the aim to interrupt their sleep, forcing them to remain constantly alert, wearing down morale while attacking Imperial supply lines. Tanya becomes increasingly frustrated. Her elite combined arms unit was built for maneuver warfare, not counterinsurgency. Between battles, Tanya reflects on writing condolence letters, replacing casualties and training inexperienced recruits. She realizes that experienced soldiers become invaluable assets while new recruits slowly mature through combat. Then, just like in the episode, one night, the Federation regular forces infiltrate the Imperial position. Unlike previous guerrilla raids, this is a coordinated attack involving 2 battalions. The Federation attempts to surround Tanya's headquarters. Initially, several officers panic, but Tanya remains calm. Rather than dispersing her forces, she waits until the enemy fully commits. Once the Federation troops expose themselves, Tanya releases her hidden reserve. Major Weiss leads the 203rd Mage Battalion, who devastates the attackers from above. Without anti-aircraft weapons, the Federation troops are helpless. The surviving soldiers surrender. This victory confirms the enormous value of maintaining an elite reserve. This also helps the Central Staff to make a decision on how to proceed, ending the debate. Although victorious, Tanya notices another disturbing trend. Many of her officers are astonishingly young. Most are barely in their 20s. Visha herself remains a teenager. At the end, Tanya concludes that exhaustion is becoming the greatest enemy. Even successful defenses come at a cost. She realizes that a tired army eventually becomes a fragile army. She fears mental exhaustion will destroy combat effectiveness long before casualties do. This leads Tanya to wonder how this war can end, but that is something we'll see in the next episode, so I will end the video here. I think this episode serves its purpose as the first chapter of an anime that took so long to return. It reintroduced the characters we already knew and showed us some of the new players we will meet throughout this season. Yes, I haven't forgotten about those 2 new characters, but they come a bit later in the novel, so that is why I didn't talk about them here. I was totally sure they'd cut the parts they left out, though I would have liked to see a bit of the connections Tanya has outside her battalion, like with the goat Rommel. They have to show him at some point, right? I will not lose hope. I also think it's important to show when Ruttersdorf and Zetter disagree on how to proceed. That happened in the first season too, though at least we got scenes of them arguing, but everything would get resolved in 10 seconds. In the novel, however, Ruttersdorf strikes me as being extremely aggressive with Zetter when it comes to securing what he needs for his operations. While it's fine to show their close friendship, they really ought to show some of the friction between them as well. They also should have explained a bit about public opinion within the Empire, since that will be an important point going forward. However, I understand that, being the first episode, it was more introductory, and that the focus was mostly to Tanya's new combat group. I also like Tanya been sillier. It might be my opinion, but I think recently many anime series take that part out of their main characters to make them more serious and with more aura, but they just make them more edgy to me. But now it's your turn. Tell me what you think about this episode. Did you want to see any of the cut events? Or do you agree with me that while they could have kept some of the explanations, it was generally fine to leave them out? Let me know in the comments. If you want to know how Tanya lost her first Kampfgruppe and why, don't miss the next video. If you enjoyed the video, please support the channel by hitting the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and click the bell icon so you're notified when I upload more content like this. See you in the next video. Bye.